Hey, what you up to, Prime? Bumblebee, go fetch me a piece of paper and a pencil. Transform and roll out. I'm going to write a book. You got it, Prime. All right, Prime, I'm back. Here's your pen, Prime. A little help here. Chapter 1. I am Optimus Prime, leader of the Autobots, fighting the Decepticons and Megatron. As you know, fellow comrades, I've been working on a book that may help us defeat the Decepticons and Megatron. Games? We don't have time for games. I'm a warrior. Yeah, shut up, you lizard lips. Fine. Here, Rat Trap, roll this. See if you hit me. Catch. Yeah, nice throw, Dino Boob. Let me just pick this thing up and... What is this thing made of? Titanium?
Hi, this is Steve from Nothing Venture, Nothing Gamed. And I've been meaning to do this review for a little while. I've been sitting here reading this book and reading this book and reading this book. And as you can tell from the title and potentially thumbnail, if I actually get around to making one, I have purchased, and this is something that I purchased with my own money. There's no sponsor here. I, spend my hard-earned cash and time waiting for this book to come in the mail. I'm not jaded though. I'm really not jaded. Kind of a little bit. I'm a little bit jaded. A lot. I'm a lot. Look, I'm very jaded. But yeah, this did take a while to come in. So I did have access to the PDF, but I wanted you to see this in as real a time as we have between you and I when you're watching this video. It is the deluxe edition and the deluxe edition of a new RPG that hopefully we're going to get to play at some point in the future if we need to have like a little bit of a break from our main campaign. We're right now playing Spelljammer, but we took a break from our Pathfinder game to play Spelljammer. So if we ever need a break, probably during the holidays, we may actually have a couple of people here run. I might run this, and it has nothing to do with the stuff you see behind me. Had nothing whatsoever to do with it. It has everything to do with all this stuff, by the way. I'm a nerd. Basically, I'm a nerd and I'm into Transformers. And when I heard that your Transformers role-playing game was coming out, I immediately pre-ordered it so fast that my computers had spun. So, but I had gotten the PDF. They had given the PDFs to everyone who pre-ordered. They had given a code for the free PDF. So I had the PDF for a while. I've been reading the PDF and... nothing wrong with the PDF, but I did go ahead and get the deluxe edition of the book, and you just have to see this because this is the Tome of Primus. If my camera focus, there it is, in all of its glory, and in the back, more than meets the eye. Transformers, the core rulebook role playing game. Yes, Transformers. The Primus's words in flesh. Fun enough, it makes more sense that Transformers would make a PDF than they would make a real book. But I digress. I digress a lot. But I'm meaning to, like I said, I've been reading it, and like I said, anytime that we're gonna have a little bit of, maybe come up with the holidays, maybe some of us aren't around. There's only gonna be a few of us. We're gonna try to give this a chance to play. I'm stoked about running it, and. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be like a little bit of a review of this book. So, first things first, this uses the Essence 20 systems. So, there's a bunch of systems that actually use the Essence 20 system to make them interconnectable. And to a point, I don't know how, I haven't gone through all the other systems. Actually, I think my buddy Jared has purchased the Power Rangers game, or someone had purchased the Power Rangers game. So you have the Power Rangers, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Vampire the Masquerade Rivals. All of them use the Essence 20 system, so they're going to have very similar rules. Obviously, things like Transformers is going to have rules about turning into vehicles and what that means and what kind of stats you're going to have, and maybe skills specific and weapons specific to this system. But like I said, as far as I'm aware, I think in the description here, they all use the same generic system, so I'm pretty sure that they would be interconnectable. whether you can have vampires and Transformers fighting with each other to punch a Power Ranger in the face while they're getting bombed by an A-10 from the G.I. Joe universe. Look, that sounds like an awesome game. I don't know how possible that is, but I know that even though that they're all used to the same system, they all have their own specific rules specific to their universe and their style of games. So obviously, Power Rangers, you're going to have rules for Zords and how to combine your Zords into the Megazord and fight giant monsters. And Transformers is all about, you have your regular mode and your vehicle mode, your alt mode, and then your bot mode. Your alt mode being your vehicle of whatever that may be, and then the bot mode is when you're turning into your robot form. And rules for transforming, weapons for Transformers, all that stuff, and all that stuff that Transformers generally do. And like I said, the same thing for the G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe is probably on and the vampires, but they all use the same system for character creation. So number one, they all share the character creation system. Basically a basic character creation. I actually, if enough people want to know about it, I actually might make a separate video on like how to make a character, but they all use the same generic principle. There's 3 things you got to pick. You got to pick your origin, what type of person your character is, their role, what kind of place do you have on your team, because obviously all these are team-based games, and influence, what experiences have led you to the point that your character exists in the game. And obviously they all have influences, roles, and origins based on the universe that they're from. So everything about this is about the Autobots and the Decepticons in their war that's lasted a millennia, and then them crash landing on Earth and having to deal with that and having to disguise themselves among the people of of Earth, of us. Whether you've watched the Bay films, whether you watch the cartoons, whether you grew up with the G1 cartoon, I think there's cool stuff happening in this book. So first things first, let's take a look at the book, and I'm going to show the book here because I'm a diehard for actual books, but I'm going to probably show some higher res images on the screen here, but the artwork is just awesome. So let me take a look. Here's Optimus right over here. Oh, Optimus in all of his glory. And there's funny enough, and there's information about the Autobots. There's actually even information about Decepticons. Here's Buzzsaw, Laserbeak, Ravage, Frenzy, and Soundwave. Oh, that artwork. Oh man. And there's a picture of Ravage right there in all of his wolfy goodness. Soundwave superior. So you have all the bad guys that you would know if you know the lore and the show, even stuff from a variety of different genre versions of Transformers. And then you also have all the Autobots and in here, how to make a character and what do you need to be a character. So number one, we're going to boil this down to video is, should you get this book? If you're into Transformers in any capacity, I say it's a big yes. Just because I feel that the system is robust enough to keep people interested over long periods of time, but it's simple enough to have it to where if someone has never played a role-playing game before, and they're just so big into Transformers, and this is their first role-playing game or their second role-playing game, it's not such a daunting task to learn. There is some issues I have, and it hurts my soul to say it, but but it's a solid starting off point for them, and they even make a reference to future material that they're going to be coming out with for this book, and I can't wait, because my favorite show after obviously growing up, I watched the G1 cartoon, and I watched the movie, the Transformers the movie from the 80s, but then I went to Beast Wars and Beast Machines. I watched Armada. A couple of them in the middle I kind of skipped because life happens. Then watching Transformers Prime, and then actually going back and watching some of the other cartoons. And watching the movies, which, I have opinions on the movies, but watching all of that and consuming all of the stuff at Transformers, I can't wait to play this game. I can't wait. But yeah, so what is the Essence 20 system? So I have not gushed about this book often enough. What is the Essence 20 system? See, the Essence 20 system uses 4 stats. And like I said, I don't know if they name them differently in the different versions, but I'm pretty sure that I'm hoping they're all going to be the same. So hopefully I'm not talking on my butt. But the 4 stats you have is strength, speed, smarts, and social. The 4 S's. And how you pick your stats. So you're going to have some free-floating stats that you're going to be able to pick and put into these stats. And at a total, you're going to have 16 points to spend. And it's 1 for 1. So you can dump all of them into one with exceptions. Like I said, we're not going to go to too much character creation. But there's only a minor amount of rules. And so you get to 16 points total, but not all of them come as free points. Some of them come from some of the decisions you're going to make as you go. And depending on your form you're going to take, you're going to get a certain number of your hit points. Your certain origins will give you skills and whatnot. So you're gonna, and some of them will give you abilities to kind of use during the game. And the skill system, I think, the Essence 20 system is a D20 system. Essence 20 being a D20 is a D20 based system. So the same thing, if you played D&D, you played Pathfinder, you played any D20 system, this is going to look very, very familiar to you. But that's where I think that this ends. So there is an advantage, disadvantage mechanic. Just like if you've ever played a 5th edition D&D, because the terms advantage and disadvantage basically become synonymous for people who are into modern role-playing games. Basically is you roll 2d20s and you take the better. Disadvantage is you roll 2d20s and you take the worst of the two. This has the same mechanic. So you're going to, when you roll, say you roll with advantage, which is rolling with, if you have the edge. If anyone knows that song reference, that's probably what they were going for. If you're rolling with edge, then you roll advantage. You roll 2d20 and you take the better of the 2 dice. You roll with a snag and you roll 2d20, you take the worst of the 2. That's really where the similarities of this system ends with things like D20 with 5th edition D&D and Pathfinder, because even Pathfinder has the advantage disadvantage mechanic. But the skills is where this game shine, and it kind of bakes in a little bit of role play in the skills. So when you pick skills in this game, like I said, we're not going over overarching character creation, but skills are where this game really shine. So anytime you have, and it's a really easy way to figure out how many skills you have is how many points that I have a stat is how many skill points I should have for that stat. So there are stat specific skills. So smarts, here we go. Smarts, you can have alertness, culture, science, survival, and technology. Now, these are kind of baked into the character sheet here, and I'm going to put a high-res version of this character sheet on the screen here, but I'm just going to show you right here. I'm assuming that you can make your own skills, but where the game gives you leeway is the way the skill system works is when you take a point of a skill, you get a dice number instead of a plus. So you don't get like a +2 in alertness. You don't get a +2 or +3 or +5 in your brawl when you decide to fight somebody, or your drive. You want to drive a vehicle, or you itself are a driving vehicle and you want to operate yourself as you're driving down the road or flying in the air, or a boat and driving, just skimming across the surface of the ocean. Your proficiency or how good you are at driving or how good you are at anything is not referenced to a modifier number like a +2 or +3 or +4. It's relevant to a die size. So it starts off, when you take a skill, you get a D2. And I actually did purchase the Transformers, the game dice, and they give you this is a regular dice set, plus you have this coin here, which is now your D2. And yes, I was a little bummed that I was almost a little bit bummed when I opened this up, and I was like, the backside better be the Decepticon symbol, and it is the Decepticon symbol if the camera would focus. Autobots and Decepticons. Okay. Anyone who watched the Gen 1 will know that reference. So, yeah, you get your whole set of dice here. You don't have to buy these. You can just use any coin in your pocket, and you can use any dice. But the dice are your skill check plus the D20. So anytime you make a skill check, you roll your D20, And then you roll your whatever die you're allowed to use. So if I really want to be a fighter and I want to be like Grimlock and I'm like the best fighter, I should have put a lot of points into Brawl. And what that would do is it goes from a D2 to a D4. If I spend 2 points, it goes to spend another point, D6, goes to spend another point, D8, keeps going up all the way up to D12. You can't get higher than D12. And then what I'll do is I roll a D20 and say I got it up to a D10. I'm like really good at brawling. So I roll a D20 and then I roll a D10 and I add them together. And that's how a skill check is done. So obviously the GM will assign a difficulty and it goes, okay, it's X amount of difficult. You need a 15. Okay, D20, well, I rolled a 10 and I rolled my D10 because I'm really good at brawling. Oh, I got a 6, I got a 16. So I successfully beat somebody up and damage and whatever, then the situation would continue. That number one right there, that's cool. Where it's not just a static number, but there can be times where you having to deal with 2 different dice. And how do we mitigate this? Because in most games, there's a mitigating factor. Whether I have a feat that lets me increase it in this certain situation, or this situation is just generally like, oh, it's slippery out, so I'm going to get a detriment to my roll. So they accomplish this in 2 ways. We already talked about the rolling with edge and rolling with this snag, which affects the D20 roll. But you can also get affected by skills yourself, like abilities that you have, maybe ability your friendly use, maybe Optimus Prime is inspiring you and you were going to do a little bit better. And there's things called upshifts and downshifts. And what that does is it pushes your die up a size or down a size, depending on what you start with. So let's say it's slippery out. So the GM says, okay, well, the downshift of 2, so my D10 goes to a D8, goes to a D6. So I've got a downshifted, but Optimus said an inspiring speech and he upshifted me 1, so I go from a D6 to a D8. That's how upshifting and downshifting works. There's a chart in here for things below a D2 and above a D12 and how that rule works. And that's how you roll and you combine them together and you get your number. And there's a third thing. And the third thing is what makes this system awesome. Specializing. So what happens when you specialize, anytime you spend a skill point, you can do a couple of things. You can get a new skill that you haven't gotten before, and it starts at a D2. You can improve a skill you already have, and it pushes up the die up 1 size, whatever it is, it goes up a size, maximum D12. Or the third thing you can do, specialize. So you take a skill you already have, and you take a subset of that skill. And what does that mean? So let's take the Grimlock example, because he's one of my favorite G1 characters. And Grimlock is, he's a big brawler. He's a big beefy dude, and he's really tough, and he's really good with melee combat. He doesn't really shoot too much. He's got a gun, and he uses it from time to time, but he really likes to get up in the mix and get up on someone's grill and fight them. But Grimlock has a giant red Energon sword, so maybe he practices with that more than he does regular fisticuffs. So maybe in fisticuffs he's a D10, but then he decides specialize swords. So a specialization is a subset of the main skill. It has to be broad. It has to be narrow enough to not affect every die roll, but not so narrow that it's only going to ever affect one thing. Like you never want to go Grimlock's red Energon sword. Like you never want to go that specific, but you don't want to go specific as weapons that do damage. So there's a little bit of a middle ground, and the GM will actually give you an okay whether you can use a specific specialization. And then it's also, how do you explain you're using your specialization to get your benefit? But what's the benefit? The benefit is when you're rolling your skill check and you're allowed to use your specialization, you roll the D20 and your skill die. Let's say we're going to use an example. I'm a D10 in brawling. I've learned from Grimlock and I've trained up. And I roll my D10. I don't only roll my D10. I roll my D10 and every single dice below it. And I take the best. And you don't get to add them all because that would basically make success automatic. But what you do get is you do get to pick the best out of the line. So you're flipping a D2. You're probably not going to use the D2. We'll be honest, most likely. But you're going to roll the D4. You're going to roll the D6, you're going to roll the D8, you're going to roll the D10. So sometimes I might roll a 7 or an 8 on that D8, and that D10 I rolled a 2. Okay, well, I'm going to use the D8 because it's better. And this also goes into how you crit. If you succeeded a check, so I roll a check, I want to punch Starscream. I roll my D20, I roll my D10 brawl. Let's assume I'm not specialized. Or maybe my sword is, I got disarmed and my sword's on the floor, so I have to punch him. If I succeed with the combined total of both dice, and my skilled dice is the maximum value. So on the D10, I rolled a 10. 10 plus my D20, I succeed. Because I got the maximum number on my skill dice, I critically succeed. And then rolling 1 on the D20 is a failure. So 20 on the D20 isn't actually a crit. You'll probably succeed at what you're doing, but you have to roll the maximum number on the skill dice to be able to critically hit. The interesting thing is, the skill dice that you're rolling a maximum number on does not have to be the dice you use. So let's say, for instance, I picked up my sword and decided to stab Starscream. Okay, I rolled my D20 and I rolled my D10 and everything below it. Okay, well, I rolled a 6 on the D6, but I rolled an 8 on the D10, and I rolled a 2 on the D8. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But I rolled a 6 on the D6. That's the maximum value on a D6. But on the D10, I rolled more. So I'm going to use the D10. Okay, let's say I rolled a total of 20. Because I succeeded, and that 6 exists, I rolled that 6 for this check, I critically hit Starscream, and then bonus stuff is going to happen. The one key thing to remind is the D2 doesn't count for that. So then you'll never crit with the D2. So to start critting, you have to spend at least 2 skill points on a skill to even try to crit. So, D4s have a much higher chance of landing on any one number. So D4s are almost more likely to crit, but you're also not getting a big number. So this is why you want to push your die higher, and you wouldn't want to specialize. So the question is, do you spread out your skills and become the skill person? Do you specialize in a skill multiple times to get multiple different benefits? That's really where the game kind of comes alive. And I can see that this system, even if it wasn't Transformers, this system can really kind of let the player have enough of a base system to understand how to play, but enough freedom to kind of make the character they want and have cool stuff happen. Of course, with Transformers, what's the main thing? I'm a giant robot and I get to transform into a vehicle. There's even rules on being a vehicle with multiple forms. You want to be a triple changer? There's rules for that. You want to be a person like Blaster over here or Soundwave? And you want to have minions? You can have minions. You want to be a character like Optimus Prime and inspire your fellow Autobots? You can do that. You want to be like a weapons expert? You want to be all about the guns? You can do that. You want to be Ratchet and heal people up? There's roles for that too. And it's just every part of my nostalgia when I read this book, I go, oh, I want to try this. Ooh, I want to try that. It's just amazing. Like I said, I can't wait to play this game. And they've even gotten around the concept, especially at least in the Transformers version. They've really gotten around the concept of gear, because like Transformers don't buy things, right? Transformers don't go around. You don't see Optimus Prime or Grimlock roll up as a T-Rex and goes, "Hey, can I buy that gun from that store?" This doesn't happen. But they actually have where requisitioning stuff, because obviously, for those of you who don't know the lore, when the Transformers crash land on Earth and they kind of awakened in modern times, originally in the 80s, they kind of had to keep hidden out. And they didn't have a lot of resources. That was the whole point of them having to leave their home planet, and they didn't plan on coming here. They were just looking for energy. But the reason they came looking here is that everything was on short supply. So they don't have a lot of stuff. They're scrounging for every little piece of energy and technology that they can get to either beat back the Decepticons or have the Decepticons rule the Autobots and destroy them. So there's even a mechanic where it's like at the beginning of the session, if you're going out on your mission, so Optimus Prime or maybe Hound goes into like, hey guys, I need you to like look, we're busy fighting like Megatron and all them. We're keeping them at bay. I need you to go and deal with these other Decepticons, these rogue Decepticons that are over here messing up this power plant or messing up this dam, and they're trying to be bad people, and you got to stop them. Okay, well, we need stuff. We need to be able to have guns and stuff like that. So there is a base things where you have base stuff that you're allowed to take with you. But if you want to requisition more, there's actually a system for that, and it requires skill checks, trying to convince the higher ups that you're trustworthy enough to be entrusted with higher technology and better technology, maybe even rare and experimental. Hey, you want maybe Wheeljack made a special gun that's really cool, but he's like, man, you're new. I can't trust you with this this high tech stuff. I can't trust you with that. But hey, I coupled this together a couple of weeks ago, and I've kind of tested it. And you made your skill check. Here you go. You're allowed to have this. We trust you with this. Just bring it back and don't break it. So they include an adventure in the back, like a multi-part adventure in the back, as well as I believe I pre-ordered an adventure that should be coming, and I actually have the PDF for that, but I can review that at another time because I think that just came in. And they also give you rules for kind of generic bad guys as well. Like, the generic, Decepticon scout or Decepticon sniper. They also give you rules for human vehicles, like military vehicles that may get involved in a conflict. Or maybe there's some people in the world that don't like all the Autobots and Decepticons. They want you off the planet. They don't care who you are. So there's rules for regular, mundane vehicles, as well as the Decepticon spy and the Decepticon sniper and all these different rules. And they give you generic power levels and their skills and their specializations and their modes. Yeah, I will play this so bad. So as I see, from a big nerd talking to other nerds out there, if you love anything about Transformers, I highly suggest picking it up. If you don't know anything about Transformers, I think the system is good, but there's going to be a disconnect there for people who don't know about Transformers. Now, I'm not saying you have to know every piece of lore. Even I don't know every piece of lore about Transformers, but I know enough to get by. I probably know more than the average bear when it comes to stupid Transformers lore. But there is stuff that, like I said, it's even stuff that I don't know about. Maybe stuff that there's even lore in this book, and it kind of from the words and the eyes and the mouth of Optimus Prime, and there's even some other characters in here that kind of like they speak in the first person, which I thought was cool, and they give you like little nice like lore information and how these certain Autobots kind of see themselves. But yeah, if you don't have any base knowledge of Transformers. One of the other systems, if you're into Power Rangers, if you're into Vampire the Masquerade, if you're into what was that other one? G.I. Joe. If you're in G.I. Joe, maybe the other systems. But from a raw perspective of the system is really, really cool. Like I said, it may not be as complicated as things like D&D and Pathfinder, 5th edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition. It's less complicated than that. But it is complicated enough that I don't think you're going to get bored anytime soon, especially with the constant being able to change forms and everything. But I'm just going to run down my little bit of my pet peeves. It needed a little bit more time in editing. And this is because look, I'm pretty good at rules. Now, I'm not the greatest at rules, but I'm the person who the group goes to who says, I just got this game. Can you teach me how to play? So I'm that person. I'm that guy. Like I said, do I get rules wrong? All the time. There's only so much room in my head for rules. And okay, well, this week we're playing 5th edition. Next week we're playing Transformers. Next week we're playing Pathfinder. There's going to be some crossover. And there's like, oh wait, no, is that rule from that game? This rule? Okay, so there is times where I do confuse a couple of rules. But when I was reading this book, there was a couple of things that they went into. I wish it was edited in a different way. A couple of things is they talk about stats and they talk about the character creation in an order that I would not recommend. So from a person outside looking in who's never played an RPG before, I'd be hard pressed to figure out how to make a character unless I read a good portion of this book. Because it starts to asking you questions that you need other information to basically make a decision, but you haven't been told that information yet in the book of the order of the book. So the order of the book, I think, is a little bit wonky. And there's a couple of times in the book where a number was, editing mistakes is going to happen. So I found a couple editing mistakes. But once I referred to other things in the book when it made mention of it, I go, oh, yeah, that number, that shouldn't be a 3, that should be a 2. And that was the only time it was a 3. Every other time in the book it was a 2. That's going to happen. But there was a issue where it kept going over a rule. in another part of the book where I'm like, wait a minute, is that coming from this part or this part? It was during character creation, and they were talking about how your role, your chassis decision, what thing you turn into, gave you a benefit. Like, okay, well, you're a Cybertronian, so that means this, and it means you get these benefits. Okay, I get that. And then they went over into another part of the book and said, remember, as a Cybertronian, you get these benefits, but the way it was written, it was like, is that coming from my class? Is that coming from the fact that I'm a Cybertronian? Is that coming from this other thing? And it was weird that they put the same rule multiple times. And I understand they're trying to hit that point home, but I'm like, it confused me of where the abilities were coming from in some points. A little bit. It was just enough. I had to read it 4 or 5 times. Then I went, oh, they're just reiterating information that I should know. Not the fact that it's coming from my class. It wasn't coming from my role. It was just becoming the fact that I was a Transformer. But the way they wrote it is it sounded like it was coming from my role, but then they also mentioned it in the other section of the book about being a Cybertronian. So it was a little bit confusing on that for me. So I'm like, if I'm confused, I know that other people could be as confused as I am about it and have to read it a couple of times, and that may discourage some people. So I think that editing wise, there could have been some improvements, and it's SS20 is a relatively new system, so I kind of give them a little bit of a pass on that. But I think that they could have taken another good long hard look at how the information was shown and maybe reorganize it a little bit. That's really my only complaint. Balance wise, I haven't tested it enough to know the balance, but everything is based on dice rolls, so maybe it might be a really extra swingy system, but with the specialization that mitigates the swinging nature of it because you're going to be rolling so many dice. Obviously early levels, you're not going to have that many dice. You're going to probably pick maybe 2 skills to be really, really good at, and then maybe a smattering of other skills. And here's the key thing, because this game kind of enforces the fact that you should be picking fewer skills and being better at them than picking a wide variety of skills. It actually, funny enough, it balances that out with the fact that if you're rolling a skill and you don't have any skill points in it, you roll with a snag or disadvantage. So if you don't know anything about driving and you try to make a cool maneuver, you're rolling with disadvantage and you're not rolling adding anything else to it, and you're just hoping for the best. So on one hand, they want you to specialize and focus on those few skills you're good at. On the other hand, they want you to have skill points and skills just so you don't roll with that disadvantage. So maybe that D2 is worth it just to avoid the disadvantage. And look, you may get 1 or 2 points out of it. So yeah, Transformers the role-playing game. Like I said, going back to my previous point, if you're any fan of Transformers, even if you haven't played a role-playing game before, I suggest picking it up, or at least taking a look at it, or finding someone who has the book and playing a game and see if you like it. If you have, I'm not saying that if you don't know anything about Transformers, you shouldn't pick it up, but it'd be a harder sell for someone who isn't into role-playing games and who isn't into Transformers. If you're into role-playing games, I think is a solid pickup. If you're looking for something that's a little bit different and a little bit look, dude, haven't we always wanted to jump into a universe? Oh man, jump into a Megazord and punch some people in the face? Yeah. You want to be a giant Transformer and beat up some Decepticons? This is my jam. Can't wait to play it. But this is Steve from Nothing Venture Nothing Game. May your die rolls be crits, and may you always roll max damage. See you later.
Demolisher.
That's more of a Mumra voice, but you get it. You get it.